Well, the other snow memory that I would throw out there is so much snow collecting on the roof of the Metrodome that it collapsed the roof in.
Yes, that's right. That is
Thankfully, not during a game.
no. I mean, if it wiped out Brett Favre, it would have been a bad thing. But anyway. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fights NFL Preview Show, Week 11 edition. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, as always, the great Nick Whalen of Rotowire.com. Nick, I'm going to get right to the big question this week. Have you gotten your Taylor Swift tickets yet?
I have not gotten my Taylor Swift tickets yet. I've been following that saga online. I tell you what, I'm glad I'm not a 17-year-old teenage girl, because I feel like there would be a lot of pressure, it seems like, to get these tickets. We've covered this on the show. I've never really been to an actual concert. I've been to a couple of shows at Summerfest here in Milwaukee, which kind of counts, but I've never gone to a venue for a concert. So I'm certainly not going to pay $2,000 to see Taylor Swift.
Really? You've never been to a concert? Wow.
Not officially. No. I mean, like I said, Summerfest is kind of there's all these stages and you can kind of walk around. So you got to go in and, there are shows going on, but I've never bought a ticket and said, I'm going to see this band or this artist.
What's the longest you've ever waited in line for something?
Man, waited in line for something. I was in line at the Denver airport for 3 hours a couple of weeks ago. For security, if that counts. Okay. But yeah, I'm not familiar with how this works. Are there notoriously long lines at concerts?
Yeah, well, for purchasing a product or something like that.
I mean, online, sure, yeah.
Yeah, back in the day when you actually had to go to the ticket booth, people lined up for 3 days in advance. I think the longest I've physically stood in line for something, I think was probably for the Madden 09 release. I think I went to Walmart at 10:45 and it was coming out at midnight, and I stood there waiting for what was it? I think the Drew Brees one, when the Drew Brees was on the cover. It was one of the first.
I think so. Yeah, I was.
For
I was gonna say I thought it might be the one that had Polamalu and Larry Fitzgerald, but I think that was Madden 10. So I believe you are correct. I will say, during my days as a student at Wisconsin, they did an online lottery system for football tickets for students. Yeah. Disasters. I had 4 computers going. I only ended up getting tickets 1 out of 4 years. It was awful.
Really? And isn't it at Duke? Don't they make a big deal before the UNC game where people are out 4 days in advance in their tents and stuff like that?
I think more than that. It's weeks in advance, right? People pitch those tents. They have the whole Krzyzewskiville outside of Cameron Indoor, and people basically just live out there waiting for the box office to open.
Yeah, Shireville just does not have the same ring to it, but maybe it will grow on us as we go down in the future here. Anyways, lots to talk about in the NFL this week. You know what? Let's start right off with the Josh McDaniels thing, because we talked a little bit about this last week, right? We said that, maybe the temperature gets cranked up a little bit on his seat if he does somehow lose to the Colts and Jeff Saturday in his first game. That's it happened. So the Raiders now 2-7 this season. They lose to the Colts. They've blown multiple 3-score leads late in games. But Mark Davis, the man himself, comes out and says that Rome was not built in a day and that Josh McDaniels is not on the hot seat. But I think my favorite part of this whole saga right now is Bill Plaschke's report that the Raiders are cash poor. And if you had to pick one NFL owner that's cash poor, Mark Davis would have been at the top of my list. So what do you make of what's going on in Las Vegas right now?
Yeah, I saw that report as well, and it makes sense. I think, you have the Gruden scandal. I'm not sure what they're paying Gruden, or if they had to pay him, if they ended up firing him under probable cause. I assume some amount of money was due to John Gruden. But yeah, I think they don't want to pay another coach. That's what it comes down to. And, you signed McDaniels to a lucrative contract. I think they want to fire him. This is now 3 times in 9 games that he's kind of had a little closed door meeting with Mark Davis after the game, presumably just getting screamed at. But this is a lost season at this point for the Raiders, and a lot of teams are kind of dead in the water at this point, but most of the teams on that list did not expect to be in the playoffs and did not expect to take this big leap forward like the Raiders did this season. So it's extra devastating, right? And, they're also in a position where, they've cut all of their first round picks from the last 3 years. So there's not really any young talent on this team. And, ideally you could say, all right, maybe we'll pull the plug here. We'll get Bryce Young. We'll get CJ Stroud, and we'll be set up for the future. But I just don't think that's how this team really wants to play this. You have Derek Carr in place right now. You're not necessarily tethered to him long-term, but Devontae Adams pushed his way to Vegas to play with Derek Carr. He did not push his way to Vegas to play with CJ Stroud. So you kind of have this weird obligation to go for it right now with a team that clearly does not have anywhere near enough talent to do that.
Yeah, and yeah, both Derek Carr and Devontae Adams both also defending Josh McDaniels and
Yeah.
like adding to the Rome wasn't built in a day thing, which I don't know. I just find that really funny when it comes to the Raiders. Anyways, moving on, there is a big snowstorm coming to Buffalo, New York, and Western New York this weekend. Adam Schefter like retweeted like a meteorologist report that's saying there could be up to 6 feet dumped in Buffalo and along the Great Lakes there this Saturday and Sunday. Hopefully, the NFL does not move this game because I just love snow games, love seeing them on TV. Do you have a favorite snow game memory?
It's the LaShawn McCoy game. I think that was what, 2013, maybe. Like it's just I don't even really remember what happened in the game. I just remember LaShawn McCoy going off and looking like it reminded you of like playing recess football in fifth grade. Just trudging through the snow. And I'm with you. Like I know some people think that snow games and wind games and rain games can be sloppy, that they're low scoring, they're not fun to watch. Could not disagree more. I think the more snow, the better. Like I hope it snows 6 feet during the game. And like you said, I'm starting to get nervous that now they move this game. Like maybe there is a player safety issue at some point, but I think the worse the elements, the better from a viewership perspective.
Yeah, and that McCoy game too. He's like carrying the football like still the same weird shady way that where he would like basically hold it like way out here
exactly.
as he's carrying it. Like how that ball did not ever fall out. But for me, I mean, growing up a Patriots fan, so many great memories in the snow. You got the Tuck Rule game, the snowball itself. Tom Brady running for a touchdown in that game. He spikes the ball, falls over. 2003, Teddy Bruschi with the interception of Jay Fiedler. Right at the 5-yard line, runs in. He's like slipping and sliding all the way in. The fans are throwing the snow in the air. And that one, Tom Brady again throwing for 5 touchdowns in one quarter against the Titans in 2009. And then, as you mentioned, the LaShawn McCoy game as well.
Yeah.
Always a good
one. The other snow memory that I would throw out there is so much snow collecting on the roof of the Metrodome that it collapsed the roof in.
Yes, that's right. That is
thankfully not during a game.
No. I mean, if it wiped out Brett Favre, it would have been a bad thing. But anyways, moving on. So for this game, what do you think we see fantasy wise? I mean, are you just locking in the under on just about everything?
Well, I mean, the total, I'll have to check it right now. As of last night, I know it was already down like 6.5 points from the look ahead a few days ago. It was at like 47.5. I saw it down at 41. If you look at the history of snow games, like some are really low scoring, others aren't. Like that LaShawn McCoy game, the Eagles put up 28 points in the fourth quarter of that game. And I do think that both of these teams are pretty well equipped to play in the snow. Like they are two of probably the 4 most well-equipped teams for these conditions. Like San Francisco would be another one. Like Cleveland is obviously more than happy to keep the ball on the ground. And I think the Bills could do that as well. And the Bills, even though Josh Allen has had some just wild mistakes these last few weeks, I think he's probably the number one quarterback you would want in these conditions as far as, what he could do on the ground, not being afraid to, seek out contact by any means. So I don't necessarily know that, one team is given an advantage over the other, but for fantasy, I mean, if it's windy, if it's snowy, you feel better about the running backs, or maybe about the same about the running backs. But for guys like Stephon Diggs, for Amari Cooper, for Gabe Davis, Donovan Peoples-Jones, that becomes a little dicey.
Yeah, I would just completely stay away from this one. I mean, just hope and pray if you're actually putting them in your fantasy lineups this weekend. So we did the same thing we did last week. We took some Twitter suggestions to start the show here. Who the people want us to talk about, Nick? And they want us to talk about Derek Carr. That's a 4:00 game against Denver. 240.5 passing yards is Carr's more or less as the Raiders take on the Broncos. And that's from at PG Records 78. What do we see out of Derek Carr?
I'm going less here. I know this line is hanging around Denver, 2.5, 3 at Denver. The Broncos, I don't know that they're capable of blowing teams out, so I don't think that happens. And they already did lose to the Raiders this season, so we do need to keep that in mind. But I think this is a great spot for Denver. I think they might have sneakily the best defense in the league, even after trading Bradley Chubb. That defense has shown up every single week. I think Pat Surtain versus Devontae Adams is going to be a really interesting matchup. I think Surtain is in a pretty good spot there. So I think it's another rough week for the Raiders. This is, Denver's not a good team. They can't score, but this defense is not exactly a team you want to face when you're looking for a bounce back.
All right. We got some suggestions, and people want to know about the running back matchup in the highly anticipated Washington Commanders.
Yeah. Well, who doesn't?
Houston Texans game. And iDraggle15 wants to know about Antonio Gibson as they take on the Texans. Gibson's line on MKF is 35.5. The Commanders, excuse me, seemed more than happy to just pound the ball into the line consistently as they did against the Eagles. I think they ran close to 50 times Monday night. Same formula?
Same formula, and against a worse defense, right? I mean, Philadelphia, the defense kind of no-showed on Monday night. That was by far the bigger issue. I know there were some big turnovers on the offensive end, but that defense could not get off the field. I think they really missed Jordan Davis. You're going from the Eagles to the Texans. This might be the most appealing overall matchup in the league right now. Washington does have to go on the road. I think there is some kind of trip up potential here. I think that the Commanders, excuse me. Well, that was 2 names ago. What am I talking about?
Yeah.
They might be a little overvalued. Yeah. I mean, I still call the Chargers the San Diego Chargers. It's going to be a while. But I like the more here. Gibson wasn't super efficient against Philly, but did carry 14 times. Even if you tell me he carries 8 to 10 times against Houston, against that run defense, I think he's in a really good spot.
All right. We got Dameon Pierce on the other side. 82.5 is his more or less on MKF. Team Dardos wants to know if Eno Benjamin's going to take any carries away from Pierce and impact this line at all.
Yeah, he could. I mean, he has enough time that you would imagine he's somewhat up to speed and will be in the mix. I'm not so worried about Benjamin. I'm just worried about this matchup. I mean, with Pierce, it's kind of been every other week these last few. He goes for 92 against Vegas, 35 against Tennessee, 139 against Philly, 94 yards against the Giants last week, but took 17 carries to get there. So Houston wants to run Dameon Pierce. The question is, can they keep this game close early? If they fall behind 10-0, 14-0 at the end of the first quarter, they kind of have no choice but to get away with that. And we should mention, by the way, that the Commanders, not the Redskins, are expected to get Chase Young back in this game. I haven't thought about Chase Young in forever, but he's been on IR. That's another big time talent that you're adding to what's already a loaded defensive line. So I don't think this stacks up very well for Dameon Pierce. To me, that number is just a little bit too high.
All right. So we don't have a line for this one, but I got to ask you, I'm going to this game Sunday, Pats, Jets in Foxborough at Gillette Stadium. How many picks do you think are going to be thrown in this one? If I set the line at 3.5.
Total or for Zach Wilson?
Total between Mac and Wilson.
Oh, more on 3.5 for sure. I would say Wilson's line is probably 2.5. Max is what, 0.5, 1.5?
I would say 1.5.
I think we get 2 from Mac, and I think we get 2 from Wilson. I don't think that there's that much of a gap between those two guys right now.
No, not at all. I mean, I heard the question today. Is Justin Fields now the guy to have in that draft class?
Man. Yeah, I think he is. I mean, Lawrence has actually looked pretty good the last couple of weeks. He's been making some progress, so that's been nice. But yeah, I mean, I don't, based on what we've seen from Fields the last 5 weeks, I don't know how you couldn't take Justin Fields. I think the running game alone is so valuable in today's NFL. And, he still might have like the lowest floor of those guys besides Zach Wilson. You think of the pick 6 last week to Okudah, like Trevor Lawrence doesn't make that throw, but he's had some low lows already this season as well. Multiple red zone interceptions, a couple in the end zone. So yeah, long-winded way of saying, I think Fields gets the slight edge over Lawrence right now.
Yeah. One other prop in this game, though, that I do love, Ramondre Stevenson fantasy points at 15.5. I am all in on the more on this one. When these two teams played like 3 weeks ago, Ramondre had 140 total yards and 7 catches, and he didn't get in the end zone in that game. I think he's due to find the end zone in this one. So I really love the more there.
Yep, I'm with you on that. I think this Jets defense is actually really good. I think that might be the most like talented unit in this game. Which says more about like the coaching infrastructure that we trust with New England. But yeah, I think New England, much like they've done really since Mac Jones reclaimed this job, they want to be very, very cautious with Jones, and that means keeping it on the ground.
Yep. All right, moving on. We got a big one in that 4:25 Eastern window. Cowboys at Vikings. Dallas is favored by 1.5 on the road there in Minnesota. The over/under at 47.5. Kirk Cousins, 259.5 passing yards is his more or less on MKF. He's thrown for 260 or more in 6 of 9 games this season. He's coming off a season high of 357 last week in Buffalo. Dallas, though, they rank 4th in the NFL in passing defense, allowing just 181 yards per game, Nick. And the only quarterback to throw for more than 230 on this Cowboys defense is Matt Stafford back in week 5. What do we get out of Kirk?
I like the less here, and I go back and forth on this game. I mean, the Cowboys being 1.5 point favorites on the road is a little puzzling, especially given the results for both of these teams last week. So I think I lead toward Minnesota winning this game, but if they're going to do that, it has to be through Dalvin Cook on the ground. That's where Dallas could be exploited as a defense. I don't see this being a game where they want Kirk Cousins to go over this number. That probably means that you're either in a shootout or you're playing from behind. So I'll go less here. I think they try to win this on the ground, excuse me. And we should mention Justin Jefferson was limited at practice on Wednesday. It was just a walkthrough, so probably not that big of a deal, but certainly something to monitor over the next couple of days. I can't imagine that he misses this game, but if he's not at 100%, that obviously changes things considerably for that Minnesota passing game.
Yeah, we'll get to JJ in a minute, but let's talk about Dak Prescott first. 250.5 passing yards is Dak's more or less. He's thrown for 251 in just one of the 3 games since he's returned from that injury. And that was last week against the Packers where he threw for 265. Vikings pass defense, though, seems like it's ripe for the picking. They rank 29th in the NFL, giving up 262 per game.
Yeah, and they're without Cameron Dantzler for this game. He's on IR now. They're already down to safety as well. So I think they can be exploited. And I know Dak's been up and down. He had the 2 picks last week. To me, those kind of look like miscommunications as opposed to bad throws. But I think he bounces back here. I think we get a really close game. I think this is probably played in the high 20s, maybe even into the low 30s. Both teams have exploitable weaknesses on defense. Like you said, the Vikings can't really stop the pass. Dallas can't really stop the run. So I think this is a good spot for Dak.
All right. Justin Jefferson, 99.5 receiving yards is his line on MKF. He nearly doubled this line last week against Buffalo. He's reached 100 yards in 6 of 9 games. Only Cooper Kupp and Christian Watson, though, have posted 100-yard games on this Cowboys defense. And that was last week when Watson had 107. So what do we get out of JJ if he's going?
If he's healthy, I like the more here. I mean, he's averaging what? He's got 135 yards over the last 6 weeks. He hasn't dipped under 98 yards. That was the floor against Arizona in week 8. And he's going to see a lot of Trayvon Diggs. I mean, this is going to be one of those matchups. These guys are going to be going at it from the first quarter all the way to the end. But, for as great as Diggs is, he gets interceptions, he takes chances. He could be burned. He's a high risk, high reward player. And some games it works out and he gives you a huge boost. He might have 2 picks and maybe bring one back for a touchdown, but other games he's taken those chances. And I side with Jefferson here. Again, Diggs is a very, very good player, but I don't think he's better than Justin Jefferson. I don't think he's capable of shutting him down. And I think Jefferson's the type of receiver that when Diggs takes those chances, he can make them pay.
Yeah. I mean, if he's playing, there's no reason. I just can't take the less because you're just in to sweat it out the entire game with the other ones. Because he could hit the number. He could hit it at the end of the second quarter with how good
look, Kirk Cousins, he had some really bad throws against the Bills, but also had some just insanely good throws in the second half and late in that game. We got to give him some credit. I don't see this being a high yardage game for him, but let's say Cousins throws for 220. It's completely conceivable that 130 of those could be to Jefferson.
And Jefferson's catch last week, Nick, better or worse than Beckham a couple of years ago?
Aesthetically, not as clean like that. There's something about Beckham's. I always compare it to the Vince Carter 360 windmill dunk from the dunk contest.
Yes.
Like in 2000, other guys have done that dunk, but nobody has done it as aesthetically cleanly as Vince Carter did. And a lot of guys have made one-handed catches, but sometimes the ball's bobbling. Like Odell's his arm was fully extended. It was just kind of perfect the way that the ball kind of zipped into his hand. So that one to me looked cooler. But in terms of degree of difficulty, I think Jefferson's was much higher.
Yeah, no, I agree. Beckham's looked much better. Just looked much better. I mean, he didn't have any help from the cornerback either. It looked like Jefferson got a little help there from the Buffalo defender going down to the ground. CeeDee Lamb, is coming on pretty strong here this season. 80.5 receiving yards. He's gone over 80 in just 3 of 9. But this Vikings pass defense, as we've been talking about, if we're going Dak to hit them more, do we got to do the same with CeeDee?
I think we do. I mean, CeeDee Lamb was awesome against Green Bay. He was by no means the reason that they lost that game. If anything, they've had trouble, kind of getting Noah Brown going since Dak has come back. Certainly Michael Gallup has been really disappointing. It's kind of been CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz doing all the heavy lifting for Dallas. So yeah, at this number against this defense, missing Cameron Dantzler, I'll go more pretty easily on CeeDee.
And what's the latest on Zeke? Is he going to come back and ruin things for us Tony Pollard owners?
God, I hope not, man. And I have Zeke in a couple leagues, but it's just the Cowboys are more fun with Tony Pollard out there. Like he's a notably better running back. And Zeke, he was on pace for 1,000 yards before the injury. So it's not like he was playing poorly. He just doesn't have that big play upside anymore. Whereas every time Tony Pollard touches the ball, you're thinking like he might break this for a touchdown. And you just don't get that with Ezekiel Elliott. He was limited as of Wednesday. We don't have a Thursday practice report quite yet. If he's healthy, they're going to play him, and it's going to be frustrating. They're going to force feed him even when they shouldn't. So my hope is that he doesn't play, but I have a feeling that he comes back.
Yeah, it's like all setting up too, because like in my leagues, I've been riding Tony Pollard now the past couple of weeks, and it's setting up nicely for the playoffs. I'm going to get there, but then Zeke's going to be back and healthy, and he's just going to vulture a bunch of carries and just ruin it for fantasy owners.
Yeah, it does feel like it's heading that way, unfortunately.
All right, moving on. Sunday Night Football, Chiefs and Chargers, an AFC West battle that's been flexed into this spot. I think they probably brought that up like 18 times during the Chargers-Niners game last week that they flexed this game in. The Chiefs are favored by 5.5 on the road. The total is 50. It seems like just about every single wide receiver on these two rosters is either hurt, out, questionable. No one is completely healthy at this point for these two teams when it comes to their wideouts. But let's talk about the two quarterbacks. Justin Herbert, 270.5 passing yards is his more or less. 5 of 9 games where he's gone over 270, but just once in the last month. As I've mentioned, the Chargers offense really struggling right now. Nick, can he kind of turn this thing around this week?
He could go over this number if one of Mike Williams or Keenan Allen play. And certainly if both of them play, I think we're going to see, the Chargers at full strength really for the first time since week 1. I mean, Keenan Allen has been MIA all season. Mike Williams obviously has been in and out as well. Both those guys were limited at practice on Wednesday. So the fact that this line has moved 1.5 points over the last 48 hours to me is a positive indication when it comes to those two receivers. 7 points, to me, that was a little much. I mean, this is a road game for the Chiefs. It's not, you're not exactly walking into Lambeau Field here, but, still, I think that's a little bit disrespectful to the Chargers. So to me, that's a wait and see. I'm checking MKF on like Sunday morning before I lock that one in on Herbert, because I just, if Allen and Williams are out, I'm going under. If they're in, I'm going more.
Yeah, I think Mike Williams is getting pretty close. They were showing him stretching and stuff like that last week before the game. He was doing those crazy stretches where he was like putting his feet all the way up behind his head, touching the ground, and then going back down and like into a somersault. I tried doing that at the gym this week, and I almost threw my back out. So I think he's just about ready to go.
Yeah, well, we are not NFL athletes. I feel like sometimes we need to clarify that. People watching the show are probably wondering like, oh, I wonder if these guys are like ex-players or something. Like, no, that is why we do not have that level of athleticism and flexibility.
Absolutely. You read my mind. Thank you for that disclaimer. We definitely need to put that out there.
Yep.
Moving on, Patrick Mahomes, 319.5 passing yards is his more or less. He's hit the more on this number in 5 of 9 games, including each of the past 4 weeks he's done this. But week 2 against the Chargers, only 235 yards, Nick. And the Chargers' pass defense is actually kind of sneaky good, but they are a little banged up.
Yeah, I think they're better without J.C. Jackson. Ironically, I think when he was healthy, he was kind of killing them. That defense has looked good the last couple of weeks. I actually thought it held up really well, all things considered, against the 49ers last week. The defensive line is still banged up. You definitely worry about that. No Joey Bosa. But overall, this defense seems to be trending in the right direction. I'm going to go less here. And for me, it's mostly because McCole Hardman is banged up. He did not play last week. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is banged up, although they do expect him to practice on Thursday. And Juju Smith-Schuster, is not going to practice today. He's still in concussion protocol. I don't think we see him. That's the number 1 receiver right now for the Kansas City Chiefs. It feels like they had really unlocked him these last few weeks, and took a really hard hit to the head.
Scary hit.
Yeah, that was by Andre Sisco of the Jags. Somehow he was not kicked out of the game. But I don't think he plays, and I think that makes a pretty big impact for KC.
All right. So who has the better fantasy day in this one? Austin Eckler or Travis Kelce? I'll give you both their numbers too. Eckler is more or less on MKF is 21.5. Kelce's 20.5.
I'm going to default to Eckler. I think both these guys could certainly go more. I mean, the one thing that you could say about the Chargers offense is even though they don't have these receivers and they can't really run the ball, Austin Eckler is still the number 1 running back in fantasy in PPR leagues because their version of the running game is basically just dumping it down to him, and they kind of use that almost as an artificial run. If Williams and Keenan Allen are back, maybe we see less of that, but Austin Eckler is going to be involved no matter what. He is Justin Herbert's trusted safety valve. I don't know that they could get him going on the ground, but he's just a guarantee to be involved as a pass catcher out of the backfield. So I lean toward his direction.
And who do you like in this game? I like the Chargers to cover this. I think this is going to be a lot closer than people are expecting.
Yeah, I was shocked by that Chiefs 7 number when it opened on Monday. I jumped on the Chargers right away. It's down to 5.5. I still like the Chargers to cover this game. I think I'll take the Chiefs to win straight up in my pick'em pool. I think it probably ends up looking a lot like that week 2 matchup where I thought the Chargers were the better team, and they didn't have Keenan Allen for that game. That was the 99-yard pick six. I'm sure you remember. If that did not happen, I think the Chargers win that game. So yeah, Chiefs are looking a little overvalued to me right now.
All right. Yeah, I like Kansas City by a field goal in this one. So give me the Chargers with the points. All right, Nick, anything else this weekend you're looking forward to?
Well, I'm heading up to Lambeau Field tonight,
Nice.
right? As soon as we finish up, I'm hopping in the car, getting up there. Going to be in the house for Packers Titans tonight. Very much looking forward to that. This will be my first NFL game of the year. Took way too long. And we also have some breaking news. I mean, not necessarily for fantasy or MKF purposes, but Ndamukong Suh signing with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Really? They're just collecting linemen at this point.
They are.
Like, didn't they just sign Linval Joseph too?
They signed Linval Joseph yesterday. They are now signing Ndamukong Suh. Maybe this is not the greatest news as far as Jordan Davis and his recovery from that ankle injury, but Ndamukong Suh, I got, somebody we have not heard from in a while.
No, I didn't even realize. Yeah. Okay. Well, very good. All right. Look at that. A little breaking news here on MKF's NFL show. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight, and good luck in your contest this week.